Welcome to Inside Out, a yoga therapy podcast with me, Jane.
And me, Sophie.
In this week's episode, we're going to, as we said in our last poddy, we're going to talk about community and specifically the spaces of community that we can create as yoga teachers and yoga therapists, and how we can really encourage people to come back to those spaces, and also how lovely and enjoyable and joyous it is when you have those communities. They become a really important part of your week. So join us on our little journey around community in yoga.
Yes, community, one of the best aspects of being part of yoga space, when it works well, when it's safe, when it's positive, when it's nourishing and when it's empowering. And I think that as a yoga teacher, I've often underestimated the power of a group class in building community. For Move and Heal, we ran some chair yoga for the elderly, and we did a little documentary just to capture kind of their feedback. And the way that my brain works was that I was thinking that the feedback would be that they felt stronger, or they'd learned something about sleep hygiene, or, they'd learned, a tool of yoga like awareness or contemplation. And actually the main feedback, because the In Parallel Productions did this amazing job of doing the workshopping with the people, the students, and then they took them to one side and did one-to-one interviews with them. And when you watch that documentary, the main feedback that they'd got from these, I think it was about a year's worth of classes, was it's the community. It's the coming together. It's having a chat with people. It's the cups of tea, because yoga lends itself to doing, a coffee morning thing. And it was community that they fed back, that they absolutely loved about those sessions.
Yeah, and it's so interesting, isn't it? Because obviously progress in the practice of yoga traditionally is that we work on our own, go away and we do our own practice, and that's how but we live in the modern world, and we're householders, and we're all, struggling with the sort of potential isolation and the way the world is. So I feel like these communities are even more relevant now than they've ever been. And if it's something like yoga that brings people together, then obviously what's behind it is trying to feel a little bit better, trying to be a bit of a better person, and also just to have those, wholesome experiences that are really uplifting. And you're right. It's so interesting when you get feedback from those kind of groups, because I used to have a chair yoga group in Ashton, and a lot of the time, they'd say, "Oh, I didn't, I can put my bra on now. I don't have to ask anybody because I can get my arms behind my back." And some practical things like that. But mostly it was, "Oh, don't we have a lovely time? Don't we have a laugh?" Do you know what I mean? And I think, and it will depend on the different demographic, but certainly when you're working therapeutically, I do think that those group sessions are so helpful. And without people thinking, and we were talking about this, so last night I was at this film premiere for George House Trust for the African Men's Group, and George House Trust is a charity for people living with HIV. And one of the things that one of the guys who's in the film says is, he said, and I think people probably were worried that when they'd come, it was going to be like a tragedy club and everyone was going to be feeling sorry for themselves. But it isn't like that. We have fun and it's joyous. And, I do yoga with them sometimes, and it's just beautiful. And that, there's men from so many different varying backgrounds, but they all come together. They do whatever they do, and then they have so for them it's the food, it's the jollof rice. They're always waiting. You can see them when the food comes in, everybody's concentration goes a bit.
That's
because, the yoga's nice. Usually, it's like if they do something that that they have to finish it before they have the food. But it is, community is so important, isn't it, for our, and again, when we're looking at all the domains of what yoga is and how we can help people to feel better, our connections with other people are so important. And being able to see those friendly, smiling faces, of course, as we know, is really great for our feeling of safety and that sort of vagal response that, oh, yeah, look at these smiling faces that I'm seeing around me and feeling like I'm being held. And so can you tell us a little bit more about any of your other communities that you've worked with? Because I know you've got a few, haven't you?
Yeah, and I was just thinking that actually when you was just speaking about the George House Trust, about how important it is that yoga reaches diverse communities and how each community has its own expression of what community means.
Yeah.
And ultimately, yeah, absolutely, that idea that we have been wired to feel better spending time with others. And we know that when we're going through a challenging time mentally, physically, or emotionally, your mind can tell you that not to reach out. It can tell you that you don't have the energy to get to that community group.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about how most of the teachers that I've spoken to, whether it be Pilates teachers, yoga teachers, or people running studio spaces, fitness instructors, there seems to be a little bit of a shift since the pandemic. And they have said to me, I used to get community groups of 15 people come in, and now it's like, I struggle for 8, I struggle for 2, I struggle for 3. And I think what you and I really want to do in this episode in particular is really celebrate group spaces and being part of a community that shares. So I, through Move and Heal, do a chair yoga group for the elderly, and that was running in Chadderton and Failsworth. And we have to remember that at some point along its journey, I'm sure you could speak more about this, but yoga became this class thing of it being middle class, white women only. And it's, how that evolved and how that came to be, I'm not too sure, but that is where it was. And one of the things with Move and Heal was, how do we reach into communities that are saying that they can't do yoga, that it's not for them, that they have misunderstandings of what yoga is due to television and advertisements, this idea that you can't do yoga if you're not religious because they assume it's religious.
Yeah.
And the classes in Chadderton and Failsworth were, self-proclaimed working class women who had never been introduced to some of the concepts that we discussed. And like I just mentioned before, for all the tools that we explored in the yoga practices, we did it all, whether it was breath work, seated movements and shapes, talking about the education of health conditions. The real flavour in that group and those classes was, it's that ability to share how the practice had impacted on them, to check in with how they were feeling each week, to sometimes in the when we would have our coffee, it's that drifting back to what had happened in the past and reframing it and making sense of it in a place where people felt like they could be seen, heard, listened to, and then absolutely with your role as the teacher, that space be held in an appropriate way too. So I think reaching into working class populations is something that I've always felt really passionate about. And then of course something that you and I often speak about is the fact that it is mainly white people who practice yoga. So how do we then reach into communities who are of a BIPOC background and introduce yoga to them? So I've done some work in the past at the Indian Association Oldham, introducing, my lineage of yoga to them and through my teachers. And then you're at George House Trust, and then you work in the prison. I mean, how varied is that just across 4 populations?
And it's interesting as well because, you know, when I've done the yoga sessions with with both the women's group, who are a mixture, quite a lot of African women, but just a mixture, but also with the African men's group, that they're so open to it. And, you know, one of the reasons many of them have felt really stigmatized is because of the faith that they have and the way that the church views HIV. And a lot of them have left their own countries for that reason as well. And so I was really pleasantly surprised at how they, you know, they just, because these activities are given to them, so that the group comes together once a month, and Jeff, who's brilliant, organises different things for them, so like health education and stuff like that. And on this particular, the very first time I did yoga with them, he was like, well, you know, Jane's going to teach you some yoga. And, you know, I got mats out and everything, got them all settled. And some of them were still on the phone. You know, they got the mobile phones there, and they was, you know, and I didn't impose anything because I thought, no, let's just meet them where they are. And I don't know, like within 15 minutes, they were hooked. They were loving it. And at the end, they said, well, we want this every month now, at least. We really like it. And it's just so interesting, isn't it, when you just kind of present it without any, it's just you do it with them. They have the experience. And again, it's what we talked about when we did the yoga therapy, this idea of shraddha, this idea of commitment. How do you get somebody to want to do something again? Well, it's because they have a good experience in their body, their breath, their mind, their senses, and it gives them then that thing of, oh, I like it, I'd like it again. But it's a good attachment, isn't it, to create for them? And the same with the prison, you know. The first time I taught in prison, it was at a women's prison, it was at Style. And that was a very different experience. They were not very compliant to start with. And they were all saying things like, I'm too fat, I can't do yoga, miss. You know, I won't be able to do it. And I'm like, listen, wait, and let's just explore together and see what we can do. And by the end of it, they all were like, oh my God, it's brilliant. I feel so much better. And so it was interesting then to go to the men's prison, where they were very much more compliant, interestingly. But again, it's that thing of them coming together as a group of men. Some of them have done a bit of yoga before because they've gone to hot yoga places, or, you know, they do martial arts and they go to hot yoga places to sort of stretch out and everything. And they always say this, you know, we're doing this because they tell their mates, and they come from different wings, and that, you know, when a couple of them like it, then they'll tell everybody else. And they're like, we really like doing it as a group of men, miss. Is there anywhere where we can do that? Because, you know, you understand what our limitations are, because they all go to the gym. They're all, you know, bulky, a lot of them. And so, but I'm not really focusing on their bodies, even though they think that's what they're going to do. I'm focusing on the mind. And I think what they start to realise is, oh, this is what it is. And then they're all feeling better. And it's like they're all there, you know, in any group that you do, at any community, when they're all together and they have that experience and they feel like, oh, this is great. What, you know, what an amazing thing it is. I didn't know. I never knew. It's almost like they've got a little secret. You know what I mean? They've got, like, they're a little club, and they're like, oh, this is our little thing, and isn't it brilliant? You know, and they do share it with other people. And you know, it often is, isn't it? In community, it's word of mouth, that somebody else will say, oh, I've got a friend who would really benefit from this, and then they come along, and yeah, I mean, what's not to like about being in somewhere where you're doing something that's designed to help you to feel quieter and calmer and steadier, but can also be fun, and you can have a laugh.
Absolutely.
You know, because why not? Like we've said before, you know, what else is there? Joy is so important. And especially at times when it can feel, and particularly in communities like, you know, we've worked in, and especially with people who maybe economically are more challenged, everything is a struggle. Everything is right now probably feeling, and having even if they manage a few minutes in that yoga session, just to slightly put things to one side, that can be enough to help them to step out and go, oh, you know what? And look, this mate's here and I've got this person here. And, oh, yeah, like you say, we'll have a cup of tea and someone brings some cakes in, which, of course, as we know, not necessarily the healthiest things that people want to, but it doesn't matter. It's all, and people do that from a place of love, which is so nice.
And it's that thing of feeling less alone. Like, we know statistically that no matter what generation you look at, people are lonelier than ever.
Yeah.
Like, for some reason, as a millennial, I assume that Gen Z were all right. I assume that they weren't feeling lonely, but of course, I read an article which then made me look into it, and it's no matter what generation people are in, whether it's the elderly, that I work more so with the elderly, or whether it's young kids, Gen Z or millennials, we know now that people are feeling lonelier than ever. And that thing of coming together is part of our mammalian nervous system. We evolved to be in tribes, to be in communities, one for our survival, but then also to help us thrive.
Exactly.
And I watched this documentary on Netflix called Join or Die.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah, and it was this idea of, just because you mentioned about the lads in prison feeling like they were part of a club, and the whole premise of this Netflix documentary is about this professor who started to pick up this idea of social capital linked to the amount of clubs and associations that people were part of.
Right.
And when you think back to our grandparents' generations, I mean, even my nana and granddad, it wasn't, this professor wrote a book called Bowling Alone, which I haven't read, but the documentary touches on it. But even my nana and granddad were part of a social club. Yeah. If you asked my nana, she would have said to you, every Friday, Saturday and Sunday, we were in the social club week after week after week. And they actually did do bowls. And this professor is essentially saying that if you track the amount of clubs that people are part of as each decade, with the invention of television and people then getting a television in their home, there's this perfect correlation of the more television access that we have, the less clubs and associations that people are a part of. And then he links this to this idea of social capital, of which my understanding is if you are part of a group in a club, whether it be a sewing club, whether it be bowling, whether it be the NACP, like whether you're talking about politics, if you're part of a group and coming together with people, whether you're part of a yoga class, what happens is coming together allows people to have conversations, word of mouth, not just about what you're doing, but about what's going on. Yeah. Did you know that they're going to close the ticket office at Greenfield train station?
Exactly.
What impact's that going to have on people who are elderly, who can't use a ticket machine, or somebody who might have a disability? Oh, I don't agree with that. Oh, we should start a petition. Okay, start a petition, but how do we do that? So there are skills that come from being part of clubs, associations and communities.
Definitely.
That apparently, well, I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? Are being lost because we are becoming so individualised. And there's that broader level of things that I'm thinking about there politically, and what it means to have those skills, to know how to organise and to challenge the status quo and things that we're not happy with. But then there's also that thing of people struggling alone. And I know from myself where if I go through a phase of low mood, something in my brain says to me, you need to deal with this on your own, and you don't want to put like a downer on anybody else. Everybody's got their own struggles. And then I read something that said that actually happiness comes from shared struggles. And to loop it back to the idea of community and yoga classes, It's that space that you get to have a shared struggle with another person.
Yeah.
Everybody is living in a prison. Everybody is coming from a context of their corner of the universe where the rubbish needs to be picked up more, or the crime is on the rise, or there's also that community that comes from doing yoga with health conditions. So a yoga for ME or chronic fatigue syndrome. People have the opportunity to share their experience. My version of this is when I ran a group for chronic and persistent pain. The opportunity people have to just talk about their struggle with that, and then somebody else reflects it back. It's so much more powerful than you saying something as a teacher.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And also what I'd say about that, going back to this idea that it's not a misery club, but actually it's a place where people can share their experiences. They can share things that have worked for them. They can share what they do to make themselves feel better. And everybody's going to be different in that respect. But, there was a lot of, people saying, oh, I went to this acupuncturist, or I have massage at this place, or, just think, like I watched this documentary and it really helped me, or this information, or I read this book. People lend each other books. Just all of that is really, it's so important, isn't it? In when you have people who are sharing a chronic health condition. And also what I was just going to sort of cycle back to was I and a couple of my colleagues, I started a class for MenCap, and I had always wanted to work with adults with additional needs, and it was something that just came up. I was at I don't know, back in the 90s, I think it would have been maybe late 90s. I went to some thing at the university, and there was a guy there who was talking about, he'd got like a MenCap thing. It was for like a jobs fair, and I think I'd been asked to go for some reason, don't know why, because I wasn't offering any jobs. But anyway, and I got talking to him, and I said, I'd love to teach yoga. And I explained to him, it's one of the areas of accessibility that I was interested in. And he said, oh, leave it with me. And he got back to me the next week because he was into yoga, and he said, would you like to do a class? We've got £30 we can give you, which at the time was a lot. And I was like, I wasn't expecting any money, so brilliant. And I started it, and we did it for 12 uninterrupted years, that class. Wow. And some of the clients went all the way through because for them, regularity of activities is very important. And, we had some fabulous times, and we had some hilarious times. We had people flushing the clothes down the toilet. We had just somebody being frightened of a red chair. I mean, this is an environment where you learn so much about making yoga accessible for such a diverse group. But again, there was a community, and a lot of them, some of them knew each other from other activities they did, but some of them were staying in certain residential homes or places where they didn't maybe have a place where they could go and talk. There were people of varying degrees of ability to communicate, but there was quite a few who were really chatty, and they made friends. And there was a girl who was with us for a really long time, and she ended up getting a boyfriend. But it was just lovely, and it was it was joyous. It was a joyous experience as a teacher and a facilitator. Because I think that's what you are in a lot of those groups. You are facilitating an experience that is potentially empowering. So getting them to do balance, and they'd take it in turns to teach. We did it for 12 years. Some of them would teach. I'd say, do you want to teach this balance? And some of them were really good at teaching it, and they taught it. And then everybody got a chance, each week to teach something and to contribute. But again, those kinds of experiences, they are... And it carried on being £30 for that session. We all took it in turns. So there were 3 teachers. One of us would teach. The other 2 would assist, because you need assistance in those kinds of classes, even though the carers are there. Most of them were on the phones. You know how that is. And so we didn't always get paid for it, but it was an absolute, it was a it was a pleasure to go into that space and to teach that class.
What I love that you're touching on there is this idea of a yoga space, like you've said, it can be pompous, which isn't a word I'd usually use, but I love that word. And when we're building yoga communities, I think it's so important that we remember that laughter and joy and bringing in the therapy world, we call it therapeutic use of self, bringing yourself to that space. And, again, we can look at yoga online and it's so serious and it seems like people are selling it in this one way. And that's one thing I've always loved about your teaching, is that you bring your joy, your laughter, your sense of humour to making spaces feel healthy, because that is healthy for us, isn't it?
Of course it is. And actually, I always think, if you can't have a laugh, what practice are you doing? What are you doing to move forwards as yourself? It's not like, if I was using my yoga session as a way to sort of continue being a stand-up act, I'd be a bit worried. But it's not that, is it? It's the fact that we're creating a space where we're helping people to feel a bit more relaxed, and laughter is one of the ways of like diffusing that tension, or helping someone who maybe is feeling a little bit nervous to go, we have a bit of a laugh, that. Especially, not just older people, but I've noticed it with some older people who've never done something like that before, and they come along, and you can see that they're really nervous, and it's like, and I sometimes cover for my colleague Lou over at Burnage. She does a chair yoga class over there at the community centre, and it's a lot of Manchester Irish older ladies, and there's quite a few Indian ladies as well. There's a real mixture, and it's just lovely, and it's so welcoming, because the ones who've been there for a long time, they do what elders do, which is to say, "Oh, come on, love, come and sit down here. Yeah, you're all right. Don't sit there though, because there's a draft." And it's really, they've kind of taken it on as well, so that as a teacher, I do what I do to make them feel safe, but the rest of the community do that as well. Mm-hmm. And that's down to Lou and the way she's created that space, But yeah, it's joyous, and I've really missed those community. And I don't. The only one I have now is really at the prison, and then when I do stuff at George House. But I really miss having a weekly community class, which is for just normal people. Just anybody who wants to come, I think it's that, isn't it? That, and when I say normal, let's take that word out of it, because there's no such thing. But everyday, regular people.
I think what you're touching on there is that a response that you can get when you share what you're going through, because it's one thing for your mind to be telling a story, but when I think about community spaces, is that when people do articulate what they're going through, from where we are, you get that northern grit and northern wit response. Yeah. So just expressing what you're going through is met with something different to your own mind's internalization, your own mind's story, your own mind's narration of what your struggle and suffering is. The power of a group energy is that you're not going to be met with that. You're going to be met with something else. And quite often, part of that is humour and warmth, and other times it's that real sense of just somebody having empathy and compassion for you, and sometimes it's just silence, isn't it? Sometimes it's just people listening to other people speak is enough for someone to feel validated.
And sometimes something that's very powerful as well is when the group sits quietly. So that's one of the things that they love in the prison, is we always end with some quiet sitting, and how quiet that is for each individual would depend on their, what's going on for them. It's sort of in terms of neurodiversity and stuff like that, everybody's different, but they find that so powerful because it's a noisy place. And so being in the chaplaincy and having relative quiet, it's not quiet, but it's relative, is really powerful for them. And quiet allows you to, like you say, if you have got an internal story, it can help you to really just let it be. And what I was going to say about that as well, what you were, it's kind of cycling back to what you were saying before about the power of the group. Where we are right now, there are lots of groups of people who are feeling maybe frightened and threatened. And again, that's a whole area where, groups of people can come together and have that solidarity. And, I'm thinking about trans people specifically, but I'm also thinking about other groups. But just because I once taught at a trans festival because the organizer couldn't find a trans teacher to teach yoga. There was a trans teacher doing meditation, and she just said, look, would you be happy to do it? And I was like, yes, I would, but I'd really like to see somebody in this space training. And, it's that goes back to what we were saying before about bringing people from across more diverse communities together to have solidarity, but also allowing people to mix together and share their stories with each other. I just think yoga is a great leveler in that way. It allows people to express themselves as they are, and there should be, going sort of linking back to what we were saying in the last podcast, there should be no expectation to be anything other than where you are right now and who you are right now. And if you are following the tenets of yoga ethically, then that should mean that the spaces you create are inclusive as you can make them, and as accessible as you can make them. And reaching out to other teachers as well in different communities, I think is really important, just to kind of get that feedback and, just to say, well, listen, can I send my students to you? Or, I've got a student who might not feel comfortable in this environment, but they've come to this class, but I think they might feel better with you. Can I pass on your number? So that people are in an appropriate community as well, because that's the other thing, isn't it? Not everybody, some people are going to have more needs and require more support. And of course, if they can afford to do one-to-ones, or if we've got, like I always have every month I have what I call a dana, which is like somebody that I work with for free. But I can't work with everybody for free. It's like, well, how can I find a way to make it accessible for them? And the yoga world, it's like we said before, it's scary, and for a lot of people, walking into a studio is not going to be that. And some studios do have a community. When I had Yoga Shala, that was a proper community place because it was a bit scruffy. Like I said before, it was in a martial arts centre. It wasn't at all glossy. We had water coming through the roof into a bucket sometimes. But nobody would feel... Some people might, just because it was a yoga space, but most people could go up that scruffy staircase, come in a T-shirt and a pair of old leggings and go, oh, all right, I'm all right here. But nowadays, we know that these sort of palaces to lifestyle and shininess can feel very like I don't belong here. So that's where community classes are so brilliant, because you hold them in community spaces where people go. And yeah, for me, they're the real deal. You're not saying that I'm not, because I love yoga studios. It's nice to teach in a beautiful place with all the props, and they can do really good work. But for most people coming to this for the first time, it's what their entry point will be for our everyday students who live in the community. That's what they're going to experience, isn't it? They're going to come into a church hall or a community centre or whatever it is, and there's no pressure in a way. There's somehow something about those spaces. It's like the OGs that used to teach yoga back in the day. there's something really, magic happens somehow in those spaces that, when you go, sometimes when I go and observe people teaching, if I'm doing like an assessment or something, and I go and observe them teaching in a space like that, and I just feel really warm. I go in and I think, oh, this is lovely. This is really special. And everybody's all, oh, she's a really good teacher, we really love her. And, there's just a willingness to participate, which is key, really, isn't it? The people taking responsibility for themselves.
Yeah. And I think being part of any group, any activity, any club, anything where people come together, it's a reminder that there is genuine kindness in amongst us and the people around us. There's so much more openness than we're led to believe online on our algorithms and on our news channels. And there's a tremendous amount of mutual respect in our communities, and it's about us getting there. I just want to say, get yourself to something. Get yourself to the thing, the yoga group, the yoga class, anything. Just we need to return.
Dancing class, whatever it is.
Yeah, our agenda isn't. We're happy for people to just be doing something together, aren't we?
Yeah.
When people's can't come to my class anymore, it's like, just carry on doing something, carry on moving in spaces of community. And obviously, we're flying the flag of yoga, but it's that thing of don't be alone, you're not alone, and move in spaces that, if you want to, look like you, because we know that there's safety in there, that sound like you, that feel like you, or move in a new space if that's what you want to do. But move into those spaces so that you've got the opportunity to tap into something that's entirely innate. We are stronger together. We can move through any of the challenges in life together. It's just about getting yourself there or reaching out to the thing. Just know, I just think it's important that we all know we're not alone.
Yeah.
I know we can feel alone, I'm not saying that, but move in a community space and just be curious as to see what that brings up.
Absolutely. And to complete that, what I'd say is, in terms of what's going on in the world right now, coming together with your community, whatever your community is, you come together because you're stronger. Like you said, you're stronger when you're together, and when you're in person, you can't be trolled. You can't be trolled when you're in person with the people that are in your community. It's a place where you can get stronger, and you can talk about taking action, and you can cultivate activism if that's something that you want to do. But if it is just like you say, just wanting to feel like you're not on your own, do it. Join a choir, do whatever. Anything.
Let's get our communities back to doing stuff, back to doing things. And obviously, we know the challenge there is that people are feeling very exhausted and depleted.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just the getting there that's the hardest part, and then it actually refreshes and energizes you in ways that you just didn't expect.
Yeah, exactly. Go, community.
Hey, me and Jane just bringing people together.
Yeah.
That's what we hope anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And there's loads of information out there as well. You can find, that I'm always looking for things to do. And I'm like, my next thing is to join a choir. But it's like, there's so many of them now.
Yeah.
So many. And I might go for the musicals, I think. The West End musical, I quite like the idea of that.
Yeah, let your Amdram side out. You need to. It needs an expressive space.
Absolutely. Oh, so thank you, Sophie, for sharing your community spaces. I definitely will come along to one of these days. It's always nice to join in somebody else's class. So thank you.
Thank you. Onwards we go.
Yeah.
Inside Out, a yoga therapy podcast, is hosted by Jane Cragg and Sophie Coggins. To leave comments, ask questions and interact with the show, follow Yoga Therapy Podcast on Instagram. Please also subscribe, rate and leave comments wherever you listen to help the show reach more people. This podcast is recorded at QPod Studios in Oldham and produced by me, Matt Dean, with video production from Eddie Corteen for QPod Productions. For more information, visit kupod.co.uk.